Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and we are live at 83weeks.com on the heels of a pretty big doggone AEW pay-per-view. AEW London All In 2024, now in the record books. You know, they said earlier in the week, or maybe it was last week, that they were going to start the post-match media scrum at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. And I thought, man, that's going to be kind of a short show for AEW, but they did it, Eric. What'd you think, man, of the timing of the show, the matches, the content? What caught your eye? What'd you dig? What didn't you dig?
I think MJF is a superstar. He is a classic heel in the modern era and has made that transition really well. He's got the psychology, and it's just part of him. It's not something he's learned or studied. Perhaps he's studied, perhaps he's watched film and studied other heels, but it comes very naturally to him. And I think he did a freaking outstanding job. He put on a clinic as a heel. He really did.
I was very impressed with his work as well. We had a total 12 matches if you count the pre-show. We started with what felt like an Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal type match. We've all seen the WrestleMania matches where it feels like, hey, is this just kind of thrown together to get guys on the card? It was a 16-man tag match. A lot of talent in there. Then we had Willow Nightingale and Ishii taking on Chris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway. And then we had the Von Erichs, which I thought, as an old school fan, man, how cool is that to see the Von Erichs?
That was a cool moment. That was a fun moment. I came in late on the pre-show, but I did see that. Loved watching Dustin in there, just for selfish, nostalgia reasons of my own. But no, I thought that was cool. It was a cool moment. I mean, you can be critical of it if you choose to be. I don't know how over the claw is, but it's a nostalgia moment, right? It's just, it did exactly what it was designed to do, and it was entertaining. It was fun.
It was fun. It was cool to see Sammy Guevara back. Always cool to see Dustin there, teaming with the Von Erichs and Shibata. They pick up a win, and then we start the actual pay-per-view. So the last, I guess, 8 matches or 9 matches were on pay-per-view. If you've got a question for Eric and we are live here, we would love to get your question to Eric. So keep those questions coming. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell so you'll know the next time we were live. Overall, Eric, before we break down the individual matches, I got to say, I love the Big Show feel. It does feel special when it's in a big venue like that. They had a heck of a crowd. I know there's a lot of people sort of clowning on it online saying, oh, it's less than last year. But I mean, I kind of expected that when they announced last year they were coming back. If you were Tony Khan today, would you be happy with the attendance? Like the way it looked, the way it felt? Did it feel like a big-time show to you?
Well, of course it felt like a big-time show. It was in Wembley Arena, and there were approximately 50+ thousand people there. Granted, it's a 90,000 seat capacity. Granted, last year they had 80,000 plus. And this year represents a 35% or 40% decrease from last year. So the business side of me, when I got home in another couple of days, I would sit down and look at, the realities of it. And I'd be concerned. But in terms of right now, in this moment, there is no way I could be feeling anything but pretty fucking good if I was Tony Khan. And a lot of that has to do not with the business side of it, to set the business. And this is what I struggle with all the time, guys. I know I'm getting a lot of heat for being a hater, blah, 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 blah. I don't watch wrestling the same way you all do. I watch wrestling from a producer's perspective, from a business perspective. And those are the things I focus on. I watched this show today. I did my best to I didn't even take notes. And normally I take copious notes throughout a show. And I took no notes intentionally because once I start breaking things down and looking at detail, my take on the show is going to be different, quite a bit different than the average fan's point of view. So knowing that I'm getting blistered for being negative, I thought, okay, I'm going to break this down. I'm going to analyze it, but I'm going to do my best to do it from a fan's point of view and not from a producer's point of view.
We got a lot of comments coming in here live. The most recent one I see is objectively the best pay-per-view of the year. I love the flow, the matches. If Tony can get a booker, get us to care about the matches. They are just there.
Can I stop right there? Can I stop right there? Because you hit me. You asked me a question about format, and I didn't even respond. This one was a lot easier to watch for me. Without it coming off negative, I'm usually looking for something else to do about halfway through an AEW pay-per-view. Not that the matches aren't fantastic, but lack of quality stories or something that catches my imagination tends to wear me down just a little bit. And yes, there's a lot of great action there, but that's, again, not kind of what I watch for. But the format on this one, I was a little concerned for the first 3 or 4 matches of the show. We saw 15 fucking tables, 25 ladders, a cricket bat, cricket balls, a pool cue, garbage cans, all within the first 3 matches. And I thought, and blood. Oh yeah, we had to get the blood in there. And I thought, oh, here we go. This is just, it's going to be the same old, same old. And then it started tightening up. The pace got better. I still think a few of the matches could have gone less time.
Yeah.
I think Tony Storm and Mariah, we'll talk about the match itself as we go through each one. I thought that one was a little too long for what they were trying to accomplish and what they had to work with, to be very blunt. A couple others they could have gotten it done and left them wanting more and maintaining the enthusiasm. But here's all that matters from a producer's point of view as well as a fan's, maybe more from a producer's perspective. People left there happy as hell. They were fired up. You had a Sting surprise. You had, was a Daniel Garcia surprise. You had these different beats in there that came from out of nowhere that just kept the audience kind of jacked in between all the stuff that was going on in matches too. So I felt really good about the format of the pacing of the show once we got past the first 3 matches. 4.
Yeah, I enjoyed the show as well. I thought it was a fun and easy watch. I mean, if we were comparing this to a movie, I feel like I would walk out of the theater saying, no, it was good. It was a good watch. It's a popcorn movie. Like, you can just turn it on and enjoy it and not feel like it's dragging. I didn't feel like this I do feel like there have been marathon AEW pay-per-views. I don't think that was the case here. The 4-way London ladder match for the AEW World Trios match or championship went 19 minutes. It's Pac and the Blackpool Combat Club taking on the Patriarchy, the Bang Bang Gang, and the House of Black. Again, maybe we're asking too much, but there's a lot of guys in that one, and they did a lot of cool stuff. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I do find that one maybe to be as odd as it is as a ladder match. That's not one of the matches that stands out to me. But I certainly appreciate the story that they told and all the bumps and all that. But I think when there's that many people in a match, I don't know. It loses a little bit something for me.
Well, and that's another thing. And again, I'm trying not to be critical, but it's one of the things I did notice is that what was there only really 3 singles matches? I was, again, not making notes. I'm working off memory here. It was Mariah May and Tony Storm.
Yeah, there's 5, I think. There's Danielson and Swerve, Jack Perry and Darby, Mercedes and Britt, Ospreay and MJF, Hook and Jericho, and then Mariah May and Tony Storm. That's 6. So 6 out of the 12 were singles matches.
Okay, and the majority of those happened towards the latter part of the show. And unfortunately, I didn't get to watch about the last 15 minutes of Daniel Bryan's match because I was trying to get my computer to work, knowing I was going to do this, and I had a little glitch I had to fix. So I didn't really get to watch that, but I could hear it. And the crowd was going ape shit. And again, not to repeat myself, but as a producer, as a fan, as somebody sitting in the seats that bought a ticket, when you leave a show on a high note like that, and it had been a pretty sustained high, last couple matches did a great job of keeping the crowd really excited. And I mean, that's it. At the end of the day, you can analyze, you can criticize, you can try to imagine different ways of doing things to perhaps get sometimes a better outcome. But what better outcome than the audience and the level of passion they were feeling at the end of that show? You can fuck up a lot of stuff in the beginning and they'll forget about it. They'll forget about the 14 ladder bumps and table. God almighty, does anybody ever care to see anybody go through a freaking table again? It's like, ugh, it's ridiculous. It's overkill. But you'll forget about that. I forget about that as long as you leave excited and glad that you spent the money or the time.
Well, we're glad that you're spending the time to be with us here today at 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And if you got a question for Eric, fire away. John M. is with us live, and he says garbage wrestling overload for the first hour. It's cheap and lazy, but got better, and we got some great wrestling. Pity there's no consistency in the product. There could be something special there. Thanks for jumping in and jumping on with us, John. We greatly appreciate your feedback. I do want to talk about the matches individually, but we're going to get to Ricochet. We're going to get to Nigel and a lot of that stuff. Let's just go right to the main event, though.
Yeah, I forgot about Ricochet and Nigel. Two other pretty cool surprises, by the way.
Very cool surprises. We saw Bryan Danielson become the AEW World Champion in front of his family and a heck of a crowd. He beat Swerve Strickland, had a big fight feel. The whole crowd is singing along for the final countdown. They know what the stakes are. And Eric, you've made a living on 83 Weeks for years now, talking about matches need stakes. That's why fans watch. We had title versus career. And I kind of felt like, you know, the title versus career stipulation almost gave it away. And I know there's been a lot of speculation that Bryan Danielson is going to be finishing his career and this is the last year and he's retiring. And then he came out and did these interviews in the last week or so saying, I need neck surgery by the end of the year. My daughter really just wants me to be dad. And some people said, oh, we're just throwing him off the scent. There's speculation since they announced the show that big show they're doing in Tacoma, Washington might actually be Bryan's last full-time match as a wrestler. But
I hope it is. I hope it is for Bryan's sake and for his family's sake. And Bryan's an amazing athlete. He was an amazing athlete before he ever got into professional wrestling. He is a real athlete, and he's mentally tough and physically, obviously very tough. But there comes a point when you've achieved so much, just stop while you're healthy and you can spend the rest of your life being grateful for it without hobbling around or in a wheelchair or worse. Kids are still so young. He's made a ton of money. It's not going to be an issue for him for the rest of his life. Dude, enjoy it. Get closer to your kids. You have an opportunity, Bryan, that very few people have at your age. So I hope he makes the most of it.
I'm excited to see what's next for Bryan Danielson, one of the most talented wrestlers of all time. It had a big fight feel for Swerve Strickland. I know you got to see some of the entrants. What'd you think of the presentation of what at the time was the current reigning defending champion, Swerve Strickland? What'd you think?
I've been a fan of Swerve since the get-go. Since you talked me into doing that Prince Now thing.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I better find out who I'm having fun with here. And then I started watching Swerve. And then I got into his character quite a bit. Obviously, I had a pretty strong opinion about when he won the World Championship and how that was presented. I had my own opinions of that. And I've been following him fairly closely since. I love the interview he did a couple of weeks ago with JR. That made me more of a Strickland fan than anything I've seen him do in the ring, because he was in character in a very natural, authentic way that made me believe. Now, a lot of that has to do with JR. Even to this day, JR brings a reality to his interviews and commentary, which, by the way, nice to hear in that final match. But JR can also bring the best out of someone when it comes to, to me, that's the most impressive thing I've seen Swerve do. But again, that's because of the way I look at things.
I really enjoyed the whole show, top to bottom. I thought it was a great card, but I thought they gave a star treatment to both guys. I don't think Swerve is less than for losing this match. I did like, I think a lot of people, myself included, thought, well, if Hangman cost Swerve the title, we got our Hangman appearance. I think everybody assumed it would lead right to the tap. It didn't happen. We do the old finger snap, and then there it is. What a performance. What a main event. They went 27 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll work backwards from there, going through some of the other matches, and I can't wait to ask you about Ricochet and some others. But We've got a lot of questions jumping in. First off, I want to give a shout out to Charles Ritchie for joining us here at 83weeks.com. I appreciate you becoming a new member here. Throwing you a little too sweet love. Lincoln Dog wants to know, did they waste the debut of Ricochet? I do want to talk about Ricochet, but let's come back to Ricochet. Shout out to Sean Anderson, who's jumping on with us. Appreciate you coming in and joining us here at 83weeks.com. Samantha says, why do you think AEW does awesome pay-per-views, but TV is stagnant? That's from Lady H. I don't know if I would use the word stagnant. Maybe you would, but I was just talking about this here with some friends I was watching the show with. It feels like AEW always delivers on pay-per-views. The big shows feel like more often than not, they're really, really good shows. I don't think necessarily that we have an issue with the finish of a story. I think it's how we get to that part, maybe where there's a disconnect and there's not more fans tuning in, because the AEW faithful who buy the pay-per-views, they're super served and love the show. Why do you think there is maybe, hey, the pay-per-views are awesome, but TV at times is not as awesome? That seems to be the consensus.
I'm not there, so I don't know. My guess would be, based on personal experience and observations, and this is hard to define or to quantify, but I think there's a different energy across the board. Everybody shows up at a pay-per-view feeling different than they do when they show up at TV. Perhaps you could argue it shouldn't be that way, right? They're professionals. They're making millions of dollars. What difference does it make? But it makes a freaking difference. It also makes a difference when you're in front of a large crowd. Dynamite, they're playing in front, and this is not a knock, it's just a fact. They're playing in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people. It's the energy's not the same. And when you're a live performer, whether it be, I guess, on Broadway, not speaking from experience, but whatever you're doing, if you're a musician, if you're a stand-up comic, whatever you do, if you're doing it in front of a crowd for a living, when you're doing it in front of a small crowd that lacks energy, it affects your performance. It's just human nature. It's not a criticism. It's a reality for most people. I think that's part of it. I think the fact that despite what I will acknowledge as an attempt to do better at telling stories, and when we get to Mariah and Tony, I'll talk about that in a little more detail in as positive a way as I can. But they're not there. They're not anywhere close. So the action, the intensity, the enthusiasm, the live vibe carries them over, and they deliver intense pay-per-views that the audience enjoys. It's that simple. And I think the difference between pay-per-views and TV is the human nature element that I discussed, but also because there's just no reason for the 2,000 or 3,000 people there to get too excited, because the stories, when they exist, if they exist, still aren't the type of stories that are connecting with people. Yes, your hardcore fans, the people that are burning up social media and, whatever, I'm not going to characterize. But that hardcore, loyal AEW fan, they see a story. If the wind changes direction, they see a story in that. The average viewer isn't connecting because they don't. They're not making excuses. They're just either going to be entertained or they're not. And until AEW develops some consistency and, quite frankly, higher quality, more disciplined, it's another thing I've been talking about for over 2 years, disciplined, properly structured stories that have all of the beats you need to make a story work long term in an intense emotional way, because that's what this is all about. We're just talking about the end of the show. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the emotion. People were having fun. They were cheering. They're standing. They're excited. They're living vicariously through the characters they're watching on TV. All of the things that you should be feeling when you're watching fun wrestling. And they achieve that. They've just got to find a way to achieve that on television. And that's going to come with better quality, more disciplined, well-structured stories.
I really enjoyed watching the the MJF match, and we've got a comment here from Travis Medway who says, "Hey gents, what is evident is the best wrestlers in the world take their time, pace themselves, and tell a story. Is MJF the best young wrestler we've seen for being able to manage that pace?" You can ask your question, Eric. Just hit us live here at 83weeks.com. But what do you think, man? Is that one of the things, is that one of the secret sauces, do you think, the secret ingredients for MJF, that he can just slow it down, Terry Funk style?
Remember what I said early on when I was talking about MJF? It comes so he doesn't rush. Here's what happens when you're a performer, not just with me, personal, but also the hundreds of people that I've directed, maybe more than that, over the course of 30 plus years. When you get somebody who's really confident in themselves and in their character, they're comfortable with the character that they're playing on television, right? They tend to take their time. They're in no hurry. They're having fun with the character. And when I say fun, they're enjoying the process of bringing that character to life. But when you have confidence in yourself as a performer and feel a true relationship with your character, you tend not to rush. You tend to be very natural. And people will look at your performance and go, wow, what a great actor, what a great actress, or wow, he was just born with a gift. He's so much different than anybody else. He or she is different than everybody else if they're confident in themselves and their character. But it's not unattainable for everybody. Well, not everybody. Not everybody's cut out to be a character. But I think with MJF, the magic in MJF from day one is you've heard me talk about this in 83 Weeks years ago. A lot of people who portray heels are not comfortable being a heel. They're doing it because it's their job, and they know it's their job, and they're doing it willingly. I'm not suggesting that people are doing it against their will. I am suggesting that some people love being a heel. Most people don't. You're taught from a young age. You want to do things and make people like you. Be polite, be courteous, treat others as you would want to be treated. Help old ladies walk across the street. Say please, say thank you. Yes, sir. No, sir. All the stuff you're taught as a very young child that carries over through the rest of your life. It's just unnatural to enjoy people hating you. But those who do take their time with it because they love it. And I think that's it. Maybe MJF has studied improv. Maybe he's studied acting. Maybe he's a method actor for all I know. I don't know. I don't talk to him. But by watching his performance, I think it all comes down to the fact that he loves being a heel.
Well, we love you guys being with us live here. If you got a question for Eric, keep them coming. I'm seeing nothing but high praise on social media. People saying that it was a great show. Friend of the show, Pondwater Dave, says it was a great show. Even the stuff I could care less about was good. I kind of agree, man. It was just an easy watch. Maybe that's why I called it a popcorn movie at times. But I know that you started off, when we first started this thing, you said, oh, the first three matches had this, this, and this. I know you're not a big fan of blood. You saw it in the ladies match. It was a really great match, I thought, with Mariah May and Toni Storm. I think it's been one of the better stories that we've seen in wrestling over the last year or so. And it's really something that probably should be studied with how great of a job they did with the storytelling. And for all the knocks that are out there that we've even shared here on 83 Weeks about, well, the stories, man, the story here was really well done. I'm so proud of what Toni Storm was able to sort of transform her character into. It's been really fun to watch, but it sounds like the blood maybe took you out of it. Is that fair to say?
The blood in the action. I think that match went way too long. I think in terms of character work, put the story conversation off the side for a moment. I think the character work by both of these women was not just tonight, has been outstanding. The vignettes, whether they were derivatives of our friend Crowbar or not, they're really, really well done. And they're different than. It just brings something that we haven't seen 3 million times in the last 4 years. it brings a different kind of character to the screen, and everybody's going to enjoy that. But I think she's done a great job. If you take your blinders off and your rose-colored glasses, and you're really honest and objective, if one is, not you, Conrad, but if anybody wants to be really honest and objective, and you turned off the sound and you put that match up against any other WWE women's match on a pay-per-view, for the most part, 8 out of 10 of them, those WWE women are so much further ahead technically in the ring in terms of timing, crispness, positioning. They're just more comfortable because they've got more reps in. It's not that they're more talented or less talented. Blah, 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 blah. They're getting more reps in. They're just freaking better at it. So I think technically the work in the ring was a 5 or that's not. I'd say 6 to 6.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. It was good. It was decent. It was adequate. Isn't the right word. It was fine. It wasn't outstanding technically, but here's why it doesn't matter. And this is another reason you want to put more emphasis on stories and characters than in-ring action. The audience doesn't care. The audience was so into Toni Storm, and I made a mental note of it. I remember vividly thinking this when after the match was over, she's walking back when most people fall out of character by that point, or at least they're getting ready to, because they don't think the camera's watching them. She worked her character all the way back to the point I thought to myself, it's kind of overkill, but that's what they want. That's what the audience wants. And my opinion, I don't think the audience is thinking this. So much of this is subconscious and subliminal. Not everybody's sitting there, like Dave Meltzer would, for example, making notes on the quality of the match and whether it should get an extra half star or not because of a move or something. But if you just judge it by the emotion that it creates, which is the only fucking thing that matters at the end of the day, how much emotion did it create? And the people were with her, even though this is this part that gets me excited. Even though she lost, her stock went up as a result of that loss. I really believe that. She'll be stronger Wednesday than she was last Wednesday because of that loss. And not because she lost, but because of the way she carried herself and she got the audience back. They want to root for her. And the reason they want to root for her is she's so committed to that character. You can argue all day long whether she overdoes it or underdoes it or whether she's perfect or not quite perfect. That's all subjective bullshit. The fact is she's found that character. She's defined that character. She's consistent in the way she portrays that character. And she's 100% committed to that character, not unlike MJF. And I don't mean to compare them other than here's a perfect example of two people that are really committed to an interesting and compelling character. She's different than everybody else. That makes her interesting. And her ability to go out there and become timeless Toni Storm, she believes it in those moments that she's out there. She is that character. She never breaks it. She never breaks character. I love that. So yeah, work was maybe better than but the fucking match was awesome, and the reaction she got us, which is all that matters, was off the charts.
Well, we appreciate you guys joining us live. If you got a question for Eric, keep it coming. We started with a couple of polls. I want to run through some of those results. We asked, how close to All Out is being AEW's Mania? All In is big, but no Mania, got 41%. No, they're nowhere close, got 34%. Close says 14%. 9 said they're the same. I don't think there's ever going to be a peer to WrestleMania, but I do think that if we're saying sort of Bound for Glory was the TNA big show, super show, and You've said Halloween Havoc was WCW's big show, super show. That was sort of, Halloween Havoc was the WCW version of WrestleMania. That doesn't mean it's comparable to WrestleMania. It's just,
Right.
It's the big show for the promotion. This is certainly the big show for AEW, but I don't think WrestleMania, it's such a brand. I don't think it'll ever have a peer. Do you?
No, absolutely not. I don't think WWE is ever going to have a peer, to be honest with you.
No.
Certainly not WrestleMania. Maybe Super Bowl.
Yeah, but as far as wrestling goes,
yeah. But I mean, at some point, you might want to. People may want to consider comparing the NFL to WrestleMania in terms of attendance and ticket sales and revenue and all that other stuff. But in terms of wrestling, I don't think there'll be anything ever close again.
We wanted to know: do you guys think Eric is right? Is MJF a mega star? 100% yes. Got 46% of the vote. He can be, but not yet. Got 23%. I think so. Got 21%, and nah, only got 7%.
And see, I wouldn't say he's like a superstar right now. This is what is he? 12, 14? How old is he?
For that, yeah, he's in his late 20s.
He's in his 20s.
Yes.
I sometimes I say this and I'm making a joke, but in this case, I'm absolutely serious. I actually have several pairs of shoes older than him.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how good he is at such a young age with such limited experience. He's been in AEW for 5 years. There's not a lot of house shows on his schedule. There's not a lot of reps on his schedule. He was injured for quite a while, and he's back, overcoming an injury. Good to be 28 years old. That helps, but still, my point is that this guy is like, he's a savant as a heel. I don't know if he'd be any good as a babyface, but as a heel, he's like a freaking savant.
Well, we got to see him last year as a babyface. We tried that on. I think MJF as a heel just makes more sense, and certainly he was a heel today. He had an incredible match with Will Ospreay. They went 25 minutes and 45 seconds. The only two matches that were longer than that were the Casino Gauntlet match, which I guess.
Can I talk about Will Ospreay for a second?
Sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, bro.
Oh, go ahead.
I always whine like a little bitch every time somebody does that to me, and I do it. I feel bad about it for days. A couple minutes. This is a little thing, but anybody that's ever produced television will tell you that great television is nothing but a bunch of little tiny details that are managed well. Here's what I didn't get. Not being critical, just confused. MJF, this is for the American Championship, right? That's how that match started.
Well, it's the international title, and MJF.
Oh, okay. He renamed it. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a cool. I like that. That's a smart little gimmick. I like that. Fun. MJF comes out. He's got his, Rocky gear on. It was fucking awesome. And then they do this video for Ospreay, this package, and he's like a Japanese hero, but he's in England. And it's not that it's wrong. I just, for the life of me, can't figure out why. Here's a guy that's from the UK. He is the hometown favorite, wrestling a heel that comes out dressed in an American flag, that renamed the title the American title. And now one of the biggest names in the industry, who is a hometown hero, is coming out as a representative of Japan. Not that it's wrong, but not sure that it was what it could have been. Little shit like that. I go, what? Who? Why? Who did that? I mean, it's a cool idea. I'm not criticizing the idea of it. It just doesn't make sense for me in that particular pay-per-view. Anyway, mental notes.
Something that did make sense for all of us, if you watched last year's All In, boy, Sting just got such a huge reaction in Wembley. It was such a cool moment. And then here he was as an unannounced surprise. This is the first time we've seen Sting since his retirement match back in March at Revolution in Greensboro. And he's there to save the day for his old pal Darby Allin, who lost the coffin match to Jack Perry, who retained the TNT championship. What a great use of Sting. Don't you agree?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It's moments like that that show could have been the shits, right? MJF and Ospreay could have whatever. It could have been, just use your imagination. That show could have been kind of flatlined at around a 6 or a 7 out of a scale of 1 to 10. And Sting shows up completely surprising everybody. You automatically bump from a 6 to an 8 just because that creates emotion. And that's what people will talk about when they get home. They're not going to talk about some match that they weren't really into. They're not going to complain about it. They're going to forget about it. And they're going to think about the thing that brought them the most happiness and joy and excitement. So when you're able to pull off something like that with someone like Sting, especially, it's awesome. Awesome.
We're live here. And if you've got a question for Eric, keep them coming at 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell so you know the next time we're live. Appreciate Shannon being on the show here. She says, definitely enjoy how hard you are on AEW. That's kind of weird. I feel like we have some people hate watching who've decided they hate AEW and they didn't like the show, even if they didn't buy it. And
well, I feel like, am I hating on AEW right now? Is that what I'm doing?
No, you have not. And I understand where the narrative of this comes from, because whenever you're critical, boy, that gets shared everywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, it's going to be quoted everywhere because that's what gets the headlines. And candidly, that's what works in the YouTube algorithm. But when we're talking about the show, like these reactions for pay-per-views, I feel like by and large, you've been pretty positive about being honest about the things you like and didn't like. Like, I remember you being blown away at Forbidden Door last year with Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega.
Right.
And you just heap praise on MJF and Dan. But it's like that stuff just doesn't make the headline. I'm sure you saw a lot of as we were promoting this live that we're doing right now, I'm sure you saw a lot of the negativity from people who were saying, oh, you hated it, you know, and blah, blah, blah. There's an assumption made. How do we change that narrative? Or do you really feel that way about AEW? And maybe I'm just misinformed.
No, you know better than that. Of course not. No, look, I want them to succeed. I was really hoping when they launched that they would actually outperform Nitro and outperform WWE, because I firmly, having experienced what I experienced and proven the point, believe that really intense competition brings out the best in everybody. And there's no reason not to want that. Who doesn't want that? It's exciting. Monday Night Wars were some of the most exciting times in professional wrestling history. Maybe not the most important time. I think when Vince McMahon burned the territory system to the ground and launched a national promotion and, you know, leveled up the production values in a way that nobody would have ever imagined, and turned professional wrestling in the 80s into mainstream entertainment. That was, I think, the most important time in professional wrestling. But in our recent history, I think the Monday Night Wars probably, maybe not beat that, but came close. And we all want that. We're all still hoping for that. In a way, I think that hardcore, you know, damn the torpedoes, no matter what AEW does, it's perfect, and they're, you know, whatever. I think a lot of that is just because people want it to be true. They want that Monday Night War era back because it was so much fun, flipping back and forth and arguing with your friends or debating with your friends and, you know, talking about what was going on. That was a fun time, and I think we all want it to be fun like that again. However, Muckerfuthers, I ain't gonna lie, there are things that I see that are, to me, obvious, partly because I've made some of those mistakes myself, partly because I've watched other people make those mistakes, that I can't help but be vocal about, not because I don't want it to succeed, it being AEW, but because I freaking do. And I would like to think that people are generally intelligent enough to see that. But I think people are just, especially on social media, it doesn't matter. I mean, I could post a tweet that says, I hope everybody has the best day of their life this afternoon. And you know what? People would come back and spew hate. It doesn't freaking matter. And especially in wrestling, because that's what wrestling is. Wrestling is good guys and bad guys. And to those hardcore wrestling fans, or AEW fans, I should say, I'm a bad guy because I'm pointing out flaws and things that they probably don't see or don't care about because they don't look at things the same way I do. They don't have the same experience that I do. So they're reacting to me. And that's what wrestling is. It's drama. It's combative. It's divisive. It's good guys and bad guys. That's what it is. So I'm cool with it.
Isn't it interesting?
I just hope that people listen a little more, because I think the more you know and understand, even if you don't agree, it'll help you look at things a little differently and perhaps enjoy the product even more.
Isn't it interesting that when you say anything critical about AEW, it's viewed that you hate it?
Yeah.
And you want it to fail. And if you say anything positive about it, then you're a shill.
Yeah, I want a job.
I don't know if people have figured it out, but I'm not super negative about anything that's happening today. Now, if you want me to be critical of stuff, I'm critical about the boys and girls who are no longer in the ring. They're retired. Their career's over. They're legends. I can share my opinions freely there and be critical of things. But what I don't want to do is get on here and use our platform to negatively affect the upward mobility of some young person chasing their dream. And I think about guys like Hook, and I think about guys like Brock Anderson. They're having their first matches on television in front of a national audience. That used to never happen. Those are almost unsurmountable odds to overcome. The old cliche, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, is real in a lot of ways, certainly in the minds of wrestling fans. Like, I had a friend of ours, I won't say who argued with me a few years ago. There's no chance Cody Rhodes is ever a top guy. He's a mid-carder for life, because he had just seen Stardust and he saw what he did in AEW, and he said, well, that's all he'll ever be. And that's just not fair. It's not reality. So as a rule, I'm never going to dunk on the talent. I can be critical and say, boy, I didn't like that as much as other matches. But to just bury somebody who's trying to hack their way through life in front of a national or global audience, man, that's a tall order. So if that makes me an AEW shield, then okay. Next week, I'll be a WWE shield because I'm friends with Bruce, and Ashley or Charlotte Flair is my sister-in-law. Like, who can keep up? Whatever your opinion is, your opinion is. But as I'm watching the press conference here, Eric, because I've got the press conference on a picture for our stream, I see Bryan Danielson with his child on his lap with a bandage on his forehead. He's the new champion. The belt's right in front of him. This should be a special moment. But I'm seeing half of the comments are talking about Tony Khan's on coke and AEW is all empty wrestling. I'm wondering, where do they not have anything better to do? Why are we hate watching the product? Isn't that just a weird thing that I don't think that existed during the Monday Night Wars, but it very much exists today?
Well, now I'm going to ruin your afternoon, because Tony Khan and Dave Meltzer, his surrogate, and a lot of the talent in WWE have brought it, or excuse me, in AEW have brought it upon themselves. They've created this tribalism that they complain so much about. It was a wrong move. Coming out and taking swings, taking shots, all that stuff. It's great if you can back it up, but you get your ass kicked in a court of public opinion if you don't. And I think, look, in the last 3 or 4 months, I haven't seen much of that out of Tony or even most of the talent. In fact, I can't recall seeing any of it. And I look for it. I watch for it because it gives me something to talk about. It gives me something to think about. But Tony Khan and a lot of the top talent, Chris Jericho, one of them, and there's very few people in the wrestling business I respect more than Chris and like more than Chris. But when Chris came out right away and said, within 6 months, we're going to overtake WWE, I get it. It's fun. You're rooting for your team. You're firing everybody up. You're firing up the audience. You're getting people interested. Believe me, I understand that. Guilty of taking that to excess myself, but also cognizant of what happens when you don't back it up. And that's what's happened. And I think if Tony can stay off social media, focus on his own product, continue to do good things, not only on television and pay-per-view, but in the public. Do good things, continue to focus more on telling stories. I'm giving him some credit there. People, pay fucking attention. Write it down. Put a timestamp on it. But if Tony can do those things, a lot of that negativity and hate watching and commentary will disappear. But they fertilized it. They planted it. They fertilized it. They harvested it. And now it's backfiring.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree with all that, but I just think it's interesting that people would, in theory, spend $40 or $50 on a pay-per-view that they don't want to see, filled with performers that they don't like, watching matches that they don't care about.
But I don't think that's what they're doing, Conrad. I think they're watching. They probably, maybe they liked it, and maybe just want to argue about shit. I think people are so fucked up now that they just go on social media and enjoy the debate and the argument.
It's so fascinating to me.
It is weird, but it's not just wrestling. It's everything. Anything on social media. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Fuck, I don't even go near politics on social media. I mean, it's just the most bizarre place I've ever seen. I mean, I surf it. I don't participate. But, man.
Hey, off topic, just randomly, Conrad from Huntsville wants to know, Eric, have you ever put a bear cub in the trunk of your car?
Not a bear cub.
Okay. I was just wondering because it felt random. AOTV Productions writes, hey, Eric, would you say that Tony acts more like a friend than a boss? I mean, I know you're not really there. That's hard to answer, but I think this is a valid question because critics of yours have said, well, WCW was great, but then when Eric became too friendly with the talent. I know that you've answered that on 83 Weeks. Whatever your opinion is what your opinion is. But you've heard people say that about you, and now people are saying that about Tony Khan. What is your reaction to that?
You know, it's funny. It's like some people say, oh, he's such an asshole. He wouldn't even make eye contact with me. He'd walk by me, wouldn't even say hi. Just, oh, no, all I did was want to hang out with wrestlers. Like, what the fuck?
Which one is it?
Yeah. And the answer is, wasn't either one of them. The truth is, for me, and I'll get to Tony in a second on my perception, because I don't know, I'm not there. But for me, people forget that I was a low-level, non-threatening talent, barely talent, that was friends with a lot of people before I got into management. Now, you could argue that perhaps I should have reassessed my lines and my relationships and kind of drew new lines and all that, but I didn't. It's not my nature. I'm not going to pretend I'm somebody that I'm not just because I got a new job title. Doesn't work for me, brother. I just had to work that in. But there were people, depending on their perception of me and their relationship of me, they would see me being friendly with people that I'd been friendly with for 4 years before I got into management. It's like, oh, he wants to be buddy-buddy with the wrestlers. Whatever. You know, you can't stop people from saying stupid shit. As far as Tony goes, like I said, I don't know. You know, I'm not there. You can try to get a picture of what someone is like based on the outcomes of some pretty public situations. It appears that Tony has a hard time with conflict. It's not a comfortable position for him emotionally to be in. And generally speaking, people who avoid conflict compensate by trying to get a little friendlier, perhaps, to deal with issues. And that comes off wrong. When you're in management, it's just not going to work. It doesn't make him a bad guy. It just makes him a guy who doesn't like conflict. I'm one of those too now, by the way. I used to love conflict. There was a time that I would rather.
Yep, I know the rest of that. Yeah,
get a good fight than have good sex. Not anymore. Now I avoid conflict. I don't have any room in my life for it. But Tony, that's one of the things about being in a position that Tony's in and putting yourself as the focal point, you're going to get that kind of rumors and innuendo, and it just comes with the territory.
Looks like the most recent report we got out of WrestleTix, I'm sure there will be an official announcement, was that there were 53,393 tickets distributed today. It was originally set up for 54,817. So about 1,400 tickets away from what they had set up for. Let's talk about Britt Baker. This is a big match that a lot of people have been waiting for. Mercedes Mone with Camille, fresh off of her AEW debut, is going to pick up a win over Dr. Britt Baker for the AEW TBS Championship. And we got lots of comments about this live. Glyph, who was with us, says, just me, or did Britt come to the ring with a boo-boo face? Not super into it. Crowd really died for that match. No. And we saw other comments about Mercedes and Britt. Sean says, Britt is good on the mic, but is it hurting her that her matches aren't very good? Stood out against someone like Mercedes. We saw other people who say, hey, I don't like that they've positioned the TBS title to feel like it's more important than the AEW women's title. A lot of chatter about Mercedes and Britt Baker. What'd you think of that one?
Lack of chemistry.
Yeah, agree.
It's 100% it. Both of them are very talented. Both of them are capable. Both of them are capable of putting a match that could have stole the whole night. Both of them are capable of doing that. But sometimes the chemistry just isn't there. Doesn't mean it won't be in the future. It just wasn't there tonight. So everything felt a little bit forced. That's how I felt. Just everything felt, it wasn't wrong, it wasn't bad. Just everything felt forced.
I think if you would have said a year ago, Mariah May and Toni Storm are going to have the women's match that everybody's talking about, not Mercedes Mone and Britt Baker, that would have been hard for a lot of people to imagine. But I think that happened. I think the better story, the better match was all Mariah and Toni. I know you didn't love the blood, but did you have a favorite women's match on this card?
Well, the Toni and Mariah. I thought it was excellent. I enjoyed the hell out of it. There was nothing I didn't enjoy.
Except the blood.
It's not that, I didn't enjoy that. I just think it's so unnecessary. It's just cheap heat. It's just, and I know talent, and it's driven mostly by talent. I don't think Tony's going, God, cut your head open. I want to see you bleed. I don't think anybody's doing that. I just think talent, especially younger, inexperienced talent, that are pushing themselves as hard as they can, and they want to get over, and they're in a rush. They do the things that it's cheap, it's easy, and it's blood. People will be talking about, oh, I can't believe Mariah May got blood. She got juice. Oh my God. Doesn't make the match better. So that's just my opinion.
We did a poll on that. What are your thoughts on blood in pro wrestling? It should be used very, very rarely, got 65%. It adds reality to wrestling, got 26%. Just bleed, it got 4%. And always hate it, got 3%. So I think people agree less is more. But boy, that was not the case with Hook and Chris Jericho. We threw the kitchen sink at this. It was FTW rules, so we saw Big Bill and Brian Keith just interfere freely. The big finish came after Big Bill goes through a table. Brian Keith has a little bit of help from, well, I guess Hook had a little help from his father, Taz, who got up from the announce desk, applied the Taz mission. Hook gets the win. He's the FTW champion again. Lord, I can appreciate that we were trying to tell a story because it feels like he's been programmed with Chris Jericho for quite a while. But I, for one, am ready for something new for both guys here. I'm excited to see what his upward mobility is. I still think, man, he's so young. He can be so good. We always look at that second generation talent. But we're talking about a guy who was born in 1999, Eric. It's a 25-year-old. And he's out there in front of 53,000 people wrestling an absolute icon in Chris Jericho. Big moment for Hook. The match was, well, FTW rules, not your favorite. What'd you think?
I love seeing Taz. He got such a huge pop. I thought, oh my God, this could go down as the biggest pop of the night if things aren't really, really good later on in the show. Happy for Taz, but wow. if I was talent, I'd be going, ooh, I hope they like my match. I love seeing that. I love the father-son connection, but that's just, me personally, selfish bullshit. I don't know how the rest of the audience feels about it. A little overkill on the underdog thing, 3 against 1. You got to make me believe it could be true. Just give me a little to work with. You don't have to give me much. I have an imagination, and I love to use it. And if you give me just a little bit to work with, I will invest the fuck out of myself into what's going on. But that was so much overkill right off the bat that it was harder for me to enjoy the match. The story and the psychology of the match was harder for me to enjoy. I love watching Chris Jericho. Chris is, look at, he's at a stage of his life. He's certainly not at his physical prime, but he's trying to get people over.
Yeah.
And you can say what you want about that match. You can say whatever you want about Chris Jericho. Hook is better off tonight, UK time, than he was this morning when he got up.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I just think I really enjoy the previous version of Chris Jericho more than I do the learning tree. But the FTW rules thing where, there's just going to be free interference and we're asking Hook to sort of overcome that. I was thinking maybe this is going to be return for Samoa Joe to make the save. Thrilled that it was Taz instead. Let's talk about the tag match. We got the Young Bucks picking up a win. They are the AEW World Tag Team Champions, and they still are, beating FTR and the Acclaimed. Of almost every match on the show, like this one felt the most sort of last minute and thrown together. And there's lots of speculation as to why that may be. Perhaps AEW has burned through a lot of dates with the Young Bucks contract. There's other rumor and innuendo out there about that they're just running a tighter ship. They're cutting costs. They're more mindful of the bottom line and not letting guys go over on their dates, et cetera, et cetera. But I felt like last year, the Young Bucks and FTR had a lot of heat and interest heading into the match. This is a rematch with now the Acclaimed inserted, and it just didn't feel as big as last year. What'd you think?
I love the Sgt. Pepper nod for the Bucks. They came out dressed like Sgt. Pepper cover of the album, kind of. It was inspired at least by that. So I thought that was pretty cool. The match, look, the Young Bucks are impressive physically. They do things that are impressive physically. The reason I'm not huge Bucks fans is because too often they rely on, it's not even comedy, it's smartassery, and it doesn't work for me. Maybe it works. Well, actually, it's not working based on, things like ratings, but they have so much talent and they make things look so effortless, very difficult, physically difficult, challenging things to do. They can make it look like an afterthought. There's just something about their presentation. It's not bad. It's just missing the mark for me. That's all. The match I thought was pretty good. If it was thrown together, then they did a hell of a job throwing it together. It didn't seem like it had a lot of meaning to it. I know the announcers talked about the fact that FTR won in their last go round with the Bucks. I think that's what they said. So there was a little bit of backstory, which helped me go, okay, now I'm a little more interested than I would have otherwise been because you brought this new viewer. I hadn't watched their other stuff. So now you're bringing this new viewer into the conversation, which is, sidetrack, what AEW Dynamite needs to do a lot more of. When it comes to their storytelling, you need to learn how to reinforce and grow simultaneously, chew gum and walk at the same time, because not everybody that's watching watched 4 months ago. In fact, you can pretty much bet that they're not. Good chance they're not. So reinforcing story as your evolving story goes a long way. And that commentary, that little note in commentary, I only bring it up because it's a production note. That note in commentary, the fact that I remember it helps me to enjoy that match a little more. But I did love the physicality in it. Again, Bucks are They're fluid as hell, man. They can make really crazy shit look simple.
Unbelievably talented performers all the way around. I mean, a few years ago, the Acclaimed felt like they were just white hot. I mean, by AEW standards, they were getting the biggest pop every night.
They're
So
still so good. They're good.
nice to see them in the mix. Who doesn't love FTR and the Young Bucks? Next up, though, was the match that maybe was the most interesting because you didn't know what to expect. The Casino Gauntlet match. It's a who's who. Christian Cage gets his hand raised, so he is going to get an AEW title shot in the future. Along the way in the match would be Orange Cassidy, Okada. That blew me away. Like the idea that Okada, who not that long ago people were saying is the best wrestler in the world, is in a gauntlet match. But hey, it's crowded. It's a big roster.
I've yet to see this best wrestler in the world.
You'd have to see the New Japan stuff because you'll never see it watching AEW. They don't position him that way, and I don't get that.
I don't get it. So far, he is a letdown. I like his look. I can see the wheels turning in his head as a character sometimes. And I think there's something there bursting to get out. I don't know what it is, but the stuff that I see in the ring is like, you paid how much? Really?
I don't think this happens again. I think Okada, come the next AEW pay-per-view, he's going to be in a primetime spot, and I can't wait to see it.
Hope so.
Nigel McGuinness. This is a big surprise. I heard, listen, I thought and predicted months and months and months ago that Nigel would be on this card, but I thought it would be against Bryan Danielson. Of course, they went a different direction, but through the rumor and innuendo, I heard from a friend of a friend, hey, Nigel just had gear made. So I thought, oh, maybe it's still going to happen. Such a nice guy, such a big part of what AEW does now. But respectfully, when he was wrestling, he didn't get this national, global opportunity. I was thrilled to see him walk out there in his gear, doing his thing in Wembley. You got to meet Nigel in TNA, and I'm sure you've seen him here or there. How happy were you for Nigel McGuinness tonight?
One of the classiest guys, and it's funny, one of the mental notes I made during the show was he is so good, and I've said it before, actually. He's so good on color. Nigel McGuinness is what if I was hiring announcers for color commentary, Nigel McGuinness would be at the very top of my list. And you'd have to be pretty freaking good to be number 2. He's so good. He approaches color commentary the way I believe color commentary should be approached. He didn't do any play-by-play. Nigel, during his color commentary, was telling me what was going through the mind of the wrestler. That's a great color. Jesse Ventura used to do it. Now, Jesse went a little heelish and was also overly entertaining sometimes. But when you've got somebody who was a former wrestler, Taz does the same thing, by the way. But Nigel brings me into the mind of the talent in the moment better than anybody that I've heard in a long time. And you're right, I worked with Nigel in TNA. He had some health issues, which is what kept him off TV when he was in TNA. But what a eager, respectful, incredibly intelligent, articulate, and passionate guy. And I haven't been keeping up with him, so I don't know. Right, it was Desmond Wolfe back then. I was just reading the notes here. Back in TNA. I don't know what's been going on in his life. I didn't expect to see him in the ring, but to see him go from the booth, come out, surprise everybody, and just imagining how he was feeling. Like when he made his way down, the camera caught him and he was looking up into the crowd. He stopped just for a second. And I could kind of try to feel what he was feeling. It was freaking awesome. I was so happy for him because it's not that anybody deserves anything. You get what you work for. You get what you earn. But I think Nigel's commitment to the industry, sticking with it through his ups and downs, sticking through it through the disappointments, which there's been plenty of for Nigel, finding his spot and then getting that moment, man, that's a hero's journey right there. That's a movie.
Let's talk about some other folks that were in this match that were a bit of a surprise. We saw Kyle O'Reilly, maybe not a big surprise, but glad to see him back in there. Zack Sabre Jr. This
Like
is a
him.
big opportunity for him.
Like
Really?
that guy.
I figured you might. Roderick Strong, incredible performer. Mark Briscoe, over like Rover. Hangman Adam Page, who you got to assume is going to be back in there with Swerve Strickland sooner rather than later. Maybe that's on the books for Chicago. I think what a lot of people forget is next weekend, of course, is Bash in Berlin with WWE. And hey, stay tuned. We might be doing a live reaction show here at 83weeks.com for that. But the week after that is All Out in Chicago. Maybe it'll be Hangman and Swerve there, or maybe it'll be Hangman and Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett got a hero's welcome. They were chanting and going crazy for him in the middle of the night the other day in Wales. And they finally went nose to nose, Hangman and Jeff Jarrett in the Gauntlet match. We saw Kill Switch, which was interesting because, well, considering what we've seen before, and I don't know what's going on, but Ric Flair and DDP have called me back to back to back.
Rick just called me too.
Something happened. Isn't that random?
Yeah, because Rick sometimes butt dials me, so I didn't think about it, but I looked at my phone Scott.
What's happening?
Well, here, I'll hold this up. That's how weird my life is right now.
Oh, wait. So somebody got somebody's phone. Scott Hall did not call you. So this is a spoof phone number from somebody trying to troll us. It was like, why is Ric Flair calling me during the show? Why is DDP? Oh. They're back to back to back. So, yeah. Hey, if you got our phone number, get a hobby, bud. What are you doing? Kill Switch. We tease a turn here. He's introduced as Luchasaurus, and it looks like he's going to go after Christian Cage. He doesn't. And we also saw the debuting Ricochet. And we saw some comments earlier that said, man, they wasted the debut of Ricochet. I don't know if I would call that a waste, debuting at Wembley. What'd you think of the use of Ricochet tonight?
I tend to agree. I think it was a wasted opportunity. He's a massive star. He could be. I think he's. I'll be careful. I'm gonna watch what I say, but I think right now in this moment there is nobody in AEW that's better than Ricochet. Maybe some there is good, or maybe he's as good as some, but I can't think of one person who is better.
All right. I'm not arguing that, Eric, but I'm saying, would you have rather him debuted on an AEW TV in West Virginia?
No, I would have rather made a big fucking deal out of him. He got lost in the shuffle.
What I'm saying on this card, where would you have done it? I get, hey, I didn't like it, but what is the better?
No, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just a wasted opportunity. So I didn't like it. What he did was fun to watch. I enjoyed watching the match. Don't get me wrong, please. I enjoyed the match. But if you're bringing somebody over from WWE, number one, number two, somebody that's just ready to go at the top of your roster, just throwing him on a card even as big as Wembley, I would have done something. I would have done a package. I would have done a special intro in the beginning of the show. I would have done something. It wasn't a secret that he was coming over. There was I didn't know he was going to be here, surprise, but nobody was shocked that he was in AEW. I just think that moment in front of 50,000 people, emotionally, everybody's on a high, whether they're in Wembley or whether they're sitting in Cody, Wyoming, watching on television. Everybody's at a certain kind of emotional peak. Why not make the most of it as opposed to putting him in a good match?
The All In press conference is happening right now, and from what I understand, Mariah May is doing a eulogy for Tony Storm. Brian Danielson, we mentioned, came out with his daughter and made sure to say that, without a doubt, tonight was the favorite moment of his entire career. So I'm happy that he feels that way, and he gets to sort of go out on his terms. Let's do some questions. We've seen we've covered most of the matches here today, but I know we've got some folks who are itching to hear your thoughts. Barat, friend of the show, says, what did Eric the cricket fan think of the use of the cricket bat and balls in the Jericho match? And how much of a storytelling role do commentators need to play in these very hardcore weapons matches?
Barat is more than a friend of the show. He's my brother from another mother. Baz, how are you? Over in Australia. Look, it's different, right? Like, I'm not a could have done without the tables and chairs and garbage cans and I mean, look, everybody knows how I feel. Too much is too much. But I think the fact that they introduced a cricket bat and cricket balls, finally, something different, something new. If I never see another pie pan again in a hardcore match, it will be too soon. Garbage cans are ridiculous. Honest to God, I don't ever want to see another person go through a table again. Not for at least a year. There's some people go 15 people. People went through tables 15 times before the third match. But cricket balls and cricket bats? Come on now. And actually, Barat, I think you set the standard because you, my friend, were the first one in professional wrestling. Somebody stole this idea. Because I was there in Australia when you introduced a cricket bat into the match and you turned heel. It's all your fault, dude. All your fault.
We got another question here that we should hit. This one comes to us from Andrew Reed, and this is off topic, but boy, he's excited to ask. You spoke about Jeff Hardy at Victory Road. Fans speculated Jeff being screwed up wrestling Naito in Tokyo Dome a month prior. During your time in TNA, did anyone backstage bring up his behavior and performance from that show? Did you ever get a report from a New Japan show or a Tokyo Dome show?
No.
About Jeff Hardy? I mean, I never even heard that.
No.
David Hernandez says, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you evaluate the wrestling match between Darby and Jack Perry? It was a spectacle or more than a match, right?
I had things to do and I got them done during that match.
Oh, there you go. So that's your least favorite match on the show, you think?
Yeah, it was a waste of my time.
Also,
Well,
too,
it wasn't a waste of my time because I gave it about 45 seconds. Okay, he's coming out with thumbtacks stuck in his face. I'm going to go take a leak.
Let me ask you this. Do you think if they would have, and I know you said overall you kind of like the positioning and the pacing of the show, but do you think in hindsight, if there was one tiny tweak you could make, would it be that you would have Will Ospreay and MJF wrestle and then go to Jack Perry and Darby Allin and then do the ladies match with Mercedes and Camille just by flipping Jack Perry and Mercedes Moné matches? Would that have helped the chemistry of the ladies? Look, do you think that would have helped? I feel like we needed a let me up moment after MJF and Will Ospreay. And
yeah, that's a conversation to have. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I just, and again, my personal taste is preventing me from being objective. I admit it. But that kind of match, I am so turned off by it that there's nowhere you could put that match on that card other than off that card before I think it would have been a good move. I'm sorry, Jack Perry, probably a wonderful human being and a nice guy. Ain't happening. Darby Allin's getting a little too dark and he needs to lighten it up a little bit. My opinion.
We got lots of other opinions on here. Sean Anderson wants to know, I was watching the AFS watch along. Shout out for that. And I don't think there was a bad match. Mariah May and Toni Storm was my best match. What was yours? What was your favorite match tonight?
MJF.
Yeah.
MJF and Ospreay. And that's just because I love good heel work, and it's so rare to see people love being heels that get it. So I absolutely love that match. And by the way, I'm talking about MJF. Will Ospreay needs to get just as much credit. There were two people out there dancing, brother.
Efren says Bryan Danielson is not ending his career to Swerve Strickland. What happened to Shawn versus Taker stakes? Are those days gone? Now that's interesting because I think a lot of people on the outside looking in felt like when Danielson announced, if I don't win this match, I'll retire. Okay, well, he's definitely not losing. And I think other people thought, hey, if this really is his last match, it won't be against Swerve Strickland. It'll be against someone else. No knock on Swerve, but maybe there's someone that has more history there, which I get. In your opinion, because I know you think highly of Bryan Danielson as I do and the entire wrestling world does. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything negative about that guy. Who would you pick for his last opponent? If you were booking Bryan Danielson's last match, who would be Eric Bischoff's pick for his last opponent?
I don't know. I can't answer that sitting here. I'd have to really give that some thought. I mean, is this like fantasy booking? Does it matter if they're in WWE or not?
Well, I mean,
is there somebody that's available to them that could actually be booked?
Yes, someone who's something that can actually happen, not like Ric Flair in '82, but like, you know, if he's going to wrestle,
this is going to go over like, you know, a bag of rocks, but I don't give a fuck. I would build a story with Jeff.
Wow.
I'm going to go back to what I said a couple weeks ago, maybe last week. Jeff is capable of having a phenomenal storytelling, physically exciting, dramatic match. It's the way his mind works. That's his default position. He has to think about having the types of matches most people want to have in today's world environment. If you could build it, I don't know that they have any history. They probably don't. But I would create some. I would figure out a way to make it work. Because I think from just a match perspective, look, tonight was probably the biggest audience that Brian's going to wrestle in front of, unless he's around next year. You want to go out on that kind of a note, because the emotion is so high, and that's what you want people to remember in someone's last match and their last career. Personally, if Brian's thinking about retiring, I would have, if he was listening to me, I would have talked him into retiring tonight and building a story and making it matter and having your family there. Tonight would have been the night. But if he's going to have another match and another big night, I wouldn't want it to be, I don't want to see any more fucking hardcore Japanese strong style matches out of him. They're boring. They're not, I get it. It's meaningful to him, which is probably why we see so much of it. It's meaningful to him. But what's meaningful to the individual and meaningful to the audience are different sometimes. And I would love to see Bryan Danielson give me the kind of match that very few people in the world are capable of giving us. And he could do that with Jeff. Not a lot of other people. There are others, but Jeff's right there. That's what I would do. Because I don't want to see another. Tonight was a huge moment. He's wrestling in front of 50,000 plus people in front of his kids.
Yes. And won the belt in the main event.
Okay, so from a wrestling moment point of view, you're not going to get bigger than that. It is what it is.
Tacoma, a dome, October.
You're not going to put 50,000 people in a freaking dome.
I'm not saying you are. That's where he's from, motherfucker.
Yeah, but that's, yeah, okay, good. Homecoming, make you feel good. That's nothing like 50,000 people chanting your name, doing the yes, yes, yeah. And he had that. That moment is never going to get anything in Tacoma like that. It may mean more to him on a personal level, and you got to make room for that, right? It's human.
Well, I just want to be clear. You're suggesting that AEW put the belt on Jeff Jarrett. I'm not arguing. I just want to make sure I got that, because I want that to be the headline from our reaction show here. Eric Bischoff thinks Jeff Jarrett should be the next world champion, because that's what you said.
That's not what I said, but if that's what has to happen in order to make the match happen, that's what I would figure out a way to do.
Oh, I think it would be fantastic. Sign me up for that. No, I do tend to think it's going to be a Will Ospreay or a Kenny Omega. I read a report from Dave Meltzer, so who knows? But I read a report a while back that said Kenny was on the mend after he had his diverticulitis situation or losis, whatever it was. And he was going to miss All In by a month. That's what I read Dave Meltzer write many, many months ago. So if he's going to miss it by a month, that means he'll be ready about a month ahead of time before the October show. Sign me up for Kenny Omega as the final opponent for Bryan Danielson. I could get behind that. I could certainly get behind Will Ospreay.
That'll be a hard-hitting, strong style, Japanese style match.
Or Okada. You know, we were talking, we want something for Okada to do. You want to make Okada not just be another guy in the pack, or for that matter, Ricochet. Like, what a debut that could be for Ricochet on a big stage. I know he had his debut tonight, but they got a lot of options. I'm excited to see what's next for Bryan Danielson. We want to hear from you. Who would you have Bryan wrestle his last match against? And we want to give a shout out to Toppy Harley, appreciate you joining us here and becoming a new member at 83weeks.com. James Sorensen is pointing out something I didn't really think about. So Jeff Jarrett is the default last match guy. That'd be great. I hope he does it another 20 years. Maybe he can give Dory Funk his last match too. Darren Staley says, I didn't catch y'all as much as I used to, so this super chat is just a thank you, and I appreciate y'all. Well, we appreciate you, Darren. Thanks for coming to hang out with us. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button if you don't mind. David McKenzie says, if SM becomes a co-owner, would your mind change? Now, he's talking about Shane McMahon. He's not going to be an owner. AEW's not for sale. I think WBD might have a minority ownership, but there's no scenario. But it is interesting to see fans get excited in fantasy book. Like, I did have people texting me today saying, hey, is Shane there? Hey, is Becky debuting tonight? Isn't it fun around these big shows where fans get really excited and hopeful that something crazy is going to happen?
Well, it's what I was talking about before. It's that Monday Night War vibe. Everybody's hoping, they're looking for it. They got a little, they got a surprise with Sting, but it wasn't like a Monday Night War vibe. But they're looking for that. They want it. It's just a fun time, and they want it back again. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and it's a fun thing to speculate about.
We got lots of comments that read like this. DM Forever says, Swerve could have been an established champion, but instead Tony wants to be a mark with a Danielson win. A win for Swerve would have been better. Leo says, hey, Eric, do you agree with the end of the pay-per-view? I honestly thought this win could have put Swerve on the moon. Instead, they let an old vet win, # Hogan finish. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I will say I had, I think, 12 people over to watch the show today, and I took a poll before the entrances even finished. Hey, who do you got tonight? Not who do you want to win, who do you think is going to win? And it was exactly down the middle. 6 people thought Swerve would win. 6 people thought Danielson would win. We saw they went with Danielson. It was a feel-good moment. I love what I saw in the stills. I'm doing this, so I'm not watching the press conference, but I love the image of a bloody Bryan Danielson with his child and the belt. He's been such an important part of wrestling. If this is what he wanted to do, man, good for him. I'm glad he got that moment. And there's going to be plenty of other opportunity for Swerve Strickland in the future. And I do get the thinking of, boy, he could have done the time-honored tradition and put over Swerve. I get that. And maybe that could happen in a rematch. Maybe that's what
so that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's because I don't think Bryan Danielson felt like, here's what I'm guessing. Bryan could have cared less whether he won the belt or not. I really don't think, I really believe that. I don't think winning the belt is now maybe getting that match and winning it in front of his kids. Yeah. But I'm also thinking that Bryan's probably already got a plan to get it back to Swerve, because he's a pro that way. He doesn't need it to get over. He's not going to get any more over with the belt. So we'll see.
We will see. I mean, if I was going to book that too, I think I might have them do that on free TV.
Yep.
And let that last match in Tacoma, if that's really what the direction they're headed, be against somebody who has a little more history with him. But, before we get there, we've got that big show at Arthur Ashe in New York. Swerve winning the belt back at that show, that could be big. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens. Vin says, does Conrad source Dave to toll the audience? I don't know what that means, but thank you for joining us. Samantha says, what do you think is next for the Learning Tree and Hook? Separately, not together. What would you like to see? Like, Brian Keith is a guy who could be a really, really big star, and I'm glad that he's getting some TV time. I'm really optimistic about what the future holds for him. And I know you probably didn't watch Collision, but boy, in Wales, Big Bill was over like crazy. They were reacting for everything he was doing. And I made the comment with my little party here that I had for the show. Hey, that's a WWE thing. Respectfully, they're not cheering Big Bill so wildly and crazy because of things he did in AEW. They're doing that because they still remember the Enzo and Cass stuff and how they got over there. And I think that is maybe an interesting thing to talk about for a minute, if you don't mind, Derek.
Sure.
Because Daniel Bryan, obviously with the yes, yes, yes thing, he had that. Mercedes Moné, like when we go up and down, there are a lot of non-WWE stars. I know Tony Storm was there, but not at that level. But Christian Cage won the Gauntlet, and Mercedes Moné beat Dr. Britt Baker. and Bryan Danielson beat Swerve Strickland. And I know Swerve was with WWE as well. But do you think the international pay-per-view, the international audience, I mean, their reaction for Big Bill was just phenomenal. Is there something to that? And do you think that that's a trap that AEW could accidentally fall in? Just, hey, this guy was super over and he gets great reactions. It's a balancing act, is it not?
It is. And I think that's one of the reasons, you and I talked last week on 83 Weeks about the fact that, in my opinion, Wimbledon is an outlier in terms of ticket sales and not indicative of what they can do in the United States. And you and I debated that a little bit. Well, one of the reasons that I think it's an outlier is because of what you just pointed out. I think one of the reasons AEW did so well both times, previously and this time, even at 50,000 plus tickets for sure, in large part because of former WWE talent, as opposed to current AEW talent. Nothing wrong with that. Tony's paying good money for that former WWE talent, particularly some of the, Mercedes and others that are making some serious money, probably as much more than they made in WWE. So you've got to get your money back. There's nothing wrong with it business-wise, but it's also the reason why I think it's an outlier. And if anybody wants to argue my thinking on this, which you're entitled to do, obviously, but just go back and look at the yes chance that Bryan Danielson got. Bryan Danielson's fan base in Wembley is his fan base because of what he did in WWE. And again, nothing wrong with it, just a fact of life. And yes, you can rely a little too heavily on that to answer your question, because when you get back to the States, there's a lot of other WWE talent that they still get to see. WWE tours. They have live tours. AEW doesn't. So a lot of that WWE talent, those big stars, they're coming to a local market and the fans get to see them. So they're not as excited about seeing former WWE talent in the US because they get to see current WWE talent in the US on a regular basis, not just once a year, once every 2 years.
We're home stretching it here. If you got a question, be sure to fire it off right fast. And before we get out of here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. We want to do a couple more questions, though. And first, I guess I want to mention Jim, who had this to say. Hey, Eric, thanks for giving me a call and chatting me up last weekend. I don't have a question about the pay-per-view. Just wanted to say thank you. It made my weekend. Eric, why are you just calling random people? Can you explain?
I'm lonely. I'm bored.
No, you're
true.
not. Come on now.
It's not true at all. Ad-free shows has become kind of a part of our lives. And I say ours, I mean, my wife's and mine, to be honest. We've made a lot of friends there. People that have become genuine. Bharat Sundaresan, who we just heard from a little while ago, lives in Australia. He's from India. He's one of the most well-known cricket announcers in the sport anywhere in the world. And became friends with him through ad-free shows and met him in Australia when I was there a few months ago. And then he and his buddy Sid came out and hung out with us on the 4th of July. Coach Rosie is working, Coach Rosie, to be known, is working closely, Josh Rosenblatt, working with my wife on a project that she's been developing for 3 years. And it's actually coming to life. And some really, really exciting things happen because of the connections within the ad-free shows family. So here's what I do. Evan Polisher, he's our Sherpa guidesman over at Ad Free Shows. He sends me 10 names once a week, pulls them out of his hat randomly, and I like to call and surprise people. I have so much fun doing that because not all the time, but sometimes it means a lot to people. And I've had some of the most interesting conversations that I've ever had on a telephone with some of the people that I just randomly call. It's fascinating stuff. And sometimes it's meaningful. So I dig it. I look forward to doing it. And here's the fun part. Because I always, almost all the time, I block my number, so I don't have my number floating around on the internet. So people aren't calling me all day long, 24 hours a day. So I block my number. And a lot of times people go, oh, I'm not going to answer that. I don't know who it is, because that's what I would do, right? But then I get to leave them a message, and I just fuck with them. Oh, I have so much fun doing that. I called a guy one time. I'm say his name is Joe. He said, Joe, it's Dave. I'm outside. You told me to meet you outside. I'm outside. Can you hear me? I'm having a conversation with this guy, right? No, and he's just listening to a message. I called the guy back the following week, because if I miss him, I call him back, the next week. So I finally got the guy. He goes, you're not going to believe it. I was out looking in the driveway. I was trying to figure out who was calling me and who was out there waiting for me. I thought maybe I had an appointment and I forgot about it. It's this whole running gag. My point is, I do it because I have fun doing it.
Adfreeshows.com. You never know when that phone rings. It might actually be Easy E. Not only do you get bonus content from all my different podcast co-hosts, but we do watch-alongs and we have live interactive Q&As. You're on camera. They're on camera. We've got exclusive series you can't see anywhere else. Lex Luger, David Crockett, The Godfather, Kyoto, Nick Patrick, Tully Blanchard, and we're learning Lucha now with Sam Adonis. If you're enjoying what we're doing here today, we do it on a regular basis at adfreeshows.com, so be sure to check that out. Hey, we're winding down here, and there's an interesting question I want to ask you because, well, I think who better to ask than you? Darren Buss says, hello, big fan. My question is, how should they go about this coming Wednesday Night Dynamite following the pay-per-view? What should happen? And I think you're the right person to ask, Eric, because a lot of people looked around after a big show like Starrcade 97 and they said, okay, now what? And they did it again a year later after Starrcade 98. So after these big shows, WWE has historically, I know we all have the Monday after WrestleMania, but historically, that's when business would go down. And that's the reason the WWE would automatically go overseas and go to Europe and do that tour, because that market was not down. But there's almost like a big show hangover. How does AEW avoid that and then turn around and get fans motivated? Hey, we got another pay-per-view coming up in 13 days, Eric.
Yeah, that's why episodic television is so important. That's why A stories, B stories, C stories, and D stories are so important, because those D stories and C stories are the ones that evolve towards the top of the show as your A stories are finishing. So you've got a constant kind of turnover of stories that have sufficient backstory and build and focus on them, so that when you finish one pay-per-view and a couple of big stories there, you're segueing right in to your what was a C story or a B story, which now becomes an A story or a B story, which means your focus. And that's just a matter of the discipline that I was talking about earlier and the architecture of your storyline arcs. What I'm suggesting is not easy, by the way, because then you've got injuries, you've got all kinds of other things that can happen in between. But if you have an arc, and I've done it. When I was at TNA, Spike TV wanted to see a 13-week arc. And that document is floating around. In fact, I know somebody that has it. And it would be really interesting sometime to look at it on ad-free shows, because it really identifies your top talent, your A stories, it identifies your B stories, and then goes into short descriptions of how each one of those stories are going to evolve. And then when it's time for your B story to eclipse your A story, because you're paying your A story off, it's right there and it's ready to go. That's how it's done. Hopefully they're not sitting around going, okay, well, what the fuck do we do? How do we do this? And start throwing ideas around like you're starting from scratch. I doubt that that's the case, because I'm sure that they've got somewhat of an idea of what they want to do. But the way you maximize it and avoid completely falling on your ass and feel like you're rebuilding is to have those stories. You know what the next chapter is of your story. If it's a B story, you set your last chapter up on this pay-per-view so that when you slip it into your A position, it's ready to go and everybody knows what the stakes are. They're familiar with the story and the characters. I could talk for 2 hours about that, so I'm going to shut the fuck up.
Well, we're glad you didn't shut up. We're glad you joined us here today at 83weeks.com. All In is in the books. We are just a week away from WWE in Berlin and only 2 weeks away from Chicago. AEW on pay-per-view. Man, just one big show after another. Any final thoughts you want to share with us tonight about AEW in London? 53,000 people at Wembley tonight. Any final thoughts, Eric?
No, I'm sure it was, I whenever I see a show like that, I always think about the talent, how much fun they're having. Maybe for some of that roster, this is the first time they've been overseas. Maybe for some of this roster, it's the first time they've ever been overseas and part of a show or part of a big show. And, those are lifelong memories and experiences that you'll look back on forever for the rest of your life. So I always think about that because it's so much fun, especially if you've never done it before. The idea that you're, in another country and people are chanting your name, and it just feels so much different that I think about the talent, and I hope that they take the time to really appreciate it and soak it in and take lots of pictures and make the most of it.
Well, we're going to make the most of it. I hope you guys have enjoyed hanging out with us today at 83weeks.com. We're going to go live more often than not. Eric's doing it like almost every week. And no, I'm not here all the time. So I see some comments that say, go away, Conrad. Well, buddy, this is kind of our show. And you knew I would be on it because I was on the graphic. But Eric often does wise choices without me. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell. And hey, keep those comments coming. Throw us a thumbs up if you don't mind. And I'm giving this show 2 thumbs up, Eric. I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was a great pay-per-view.
I know you're talking about this show.
Well, this show's 2 thumbs up too.
All right, good.
But when we go back and we take a look at like old WCW pay-per-views, the Observer always asks fans, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. Where are you at on All In 2024? I'm thumbs up.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I give it a thumbs up. The end of the show, the last 3 or 4 matches put me in the MJF Ospreay match, put me in a frame of mind that I forgot about whatever I didn't like.
Well, that'll do it, boys and girls. We'll see you sooner rather than later. There's going to be a lot to talk about. We've got TV, and 13 days away from now, another AEW pay-per-view. We'll be back sooner rather than later. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notifications bell. We'll see you soon at 83weeks.com.